My younger brother, the heir to a wealthy family, has fallen in love with the housekeeper's daughter. At a grand party, she wore an extravagant gown and approached me delicately, saying, "Sister, the most important thing for us women is to find a good husband. Being too ambitious or career-driven isn't attractive at all." I responded with a calm smile. That same night, I instructed my assistant to freeze my brother's credit card. Chapter 1. Everyone knew that the Ma family's heir, Jacob, had fallen head over heels for the housekeeper's daughter. Rumor had it that he would go to any length for her, racing, brawling, spending fortunes at auctions just to make her smile, even buying a mansion and luxury car for her and her mother. Eventually, he changed his ways, no longer hanging out at bars, and he avoided the advances of every eligible young woman from prominent families. In private, he treated her with utmost care and tenderness. Everyone was curious about what kind of captivating charm this woman had to make the heir so devoted. But I knew, because here she was now, wearing the gown I had reserved 6 months in advance, gracefully approaching me at my own birthday party. "Oh, sister, I'm so sorry. If I had known it was your dress, I wouldn't have worn it. Now, I've even stolen the spotlight from you. It's all Jacob's fault," Jasmine said in a delicate, almost tearful voice. The strapless, high-slit gown, which clearly didn't fit her, struggled to contain her 36 curves. As soon as she entered, she captured the attention of everyone, especially the men. And of course, Jasmine enjoyed every bit of the attention. "Sister, you don't mind, do you? See? The housekeeper's daughter had the audacity to act like the rich girl. It feels like I owe her an apology. Does that make sense?" "Yes. Because the world we live in is a story, a romantic novel with my brother Jacob and Jasmine as the main characters in a sweet, pampered wife tale. And me? I'm the cannon fodder side character destined to be used and discarded in their perfect love story. Jasmine wants to be an actress? Jacob will use all the company's resources to make her a movie star. She gets pregnant? My mother will insist I cook her homemade meals. My fiancé falls for her? He'll threaten to break up with me if I don't take good care of her. And one day, her 3-year-old prodigy of a son will hack into my company's system, crashing our stock and leaving me ruined and penniless. By then, Jasmine will sweetly cuddle up to Jacob, saying, "Isn't our son amazing?" And they'll start their happy, shameless life together. Does that make sense? Obviously not. As the proud and dignified eldest daughter of the Ma family, would I accept a life as a mere side character, destined for such an ending? Absolutely not. I intend to be the protagonist of my own story. And as for the things they desire, they'll never have them. Chapter 2. Angelica. You're being unreasonable. It's just a dress. There's no need to make such a fuss. The one speaking was my fiancé, Daniel, the novel's devoted second male lead. During the 2 years Jasmine pretended to be dead after hearing about Jacob's engagement, my dashing fiancé was right by her side, offering his tender companionship. But now that Jacob found her again, Daniel could only remain by Jasmine's side in the guise of an older brother. As for me, his fiancé, I've never once held his attention. After college, Jasmine joined Daniel's company. She was a mess, constantly spilling coffee on him, inputting incorrect data, or mixing up documents during meetings. Whenever she made a mistake, she'd look up at him with teary eyes and a quivering voice, apologizing pitifully, and after receiving his forgiveness, she'd stick out her tongue playfully, promising not to do it again. This lively, innocent girl was something Daniel, with his strict, orderly life, had never encountered before. Falling for her was inevitable. He began taking Jasmine to social events, introducing her to his network, and sharing meals with her in the office, their fingers often grazing. When I stumbled upon them, Daniel's face flashed with panic before quickly regaining composure. Confronted by my suspicion, he'd shout at me, trying to mask his own conflicted feelings. "Angelica, why are you so suspicious? Jasmine is just an innocent young girl. What's wrong with me looking after her? What is your problem? Do you need me to admit I have feelings for Jasmine? Fine, I admit it. Satisfied? Angelica, can you please stop being so unreasonable? You're exhausting me." Jasmine would then look at me, eyes brimming with unfallen tears, stubbornly saying, "Angelica, Mr. Daniel and I are perfectly innocent. How could you accuse me like this?" And she'd be ready to cry, just like now, standing there in the custom gown I'd been eagerly anticipating, her eyes slightly red and gleaming with a hint of triumph as she looked at Daniel. I took my time, cutting a piece of cake and savoring it. Did I say anything? I looked up at Jasmine. I knew she was waiting for me to play the part of the arrogant, spoiled villain, just so she could shine as the pure, innocent one. You've worn the dress, and you've gained everyone's sympathy. What else? Should I apologize to you? The plate of cake in my hand was slapped to the floor, smearing everywhere. Angelica, watch your tone, Daniel shouted angrily at me. Our little scene quickly attracted attention, including that of my brother, Jacob, who was mingling with guests nearby. He strode over to Jasmine, comforting her softly, then shot me a disapproving look. Apologize. See, that's the power of the main character. Whenever she's hurt, someone will always stand up for her, be it Daniel or Jacob. My silence only made the faint glee in Jasmine's eyes grow stronger. She seemed to revel in watching me fall from grace. Sister, a woman shouldn't be so aggressive. It's unbecoming. Jasmine chimed in sweetly. We women should prioritize finding a good husband. Being too assertive or career-focused isn't attractive at all. With that, she nestled herself against Jacob, displaying her bliss. Standing nearby, Daniel's expression darkened with jealousy as he watched this display. Smiling faintly, I turned and walked toward the stage. If they want an apology, I'll give them something memorable. Chapter 3. Standing high above. I turned on the microphone I'd prepared in advance. With all eyes on me, I smiled and began. First, I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate my birthday tonight. I'm truly happy to have you all here. Now, let's move on to some official business. First, my engagement to Mr. Daniel is hereby annulled. Daniel's face turned ghostly pale, his eyes wide with shock. Second, I know everyone's curious about my brother Jacob's undying love interest. Yes, it's the lovely Miss Jasmine, standing right beside him. But, let me be clear, the doors of the Ma family will never open for her. Jasmine's face went stark white, and she wobbled, struggling to stay on her feet. She had truly become overconfident, forgetting who held the real power in the Ma family. I suppose it's time to remind her. Angelica Ma, tutored by masters from a young age, studying business abroad at 16, Ivy League graduate, returning to lead the family business at 20, and bringing it to the peak of success. The engagement to the Daniel family was advantageous for him, not me. As for Jacob, he's a lovesick fool. If he's the future of the Ma family, then it's truly doomed. Ignoring the shocked murmurs, I turned to face the trio, lifting my chin slightly. Does this apology satisfy you? Jasmine was completely stunned. She'd never imagined things would unfold this way. In her mind, I should have been storming off in a rage, only to be scolded by her protectors, winning her admiration and awe. Instead, I'd just thrown a bombshell. And it wasn't just her. Daniel was equally dumbfounded. It was as if he couldn't believe that the woman who had once chased after him, desperate to marry him, was now breaking off their engagement. Daniel's usual composed demeanor crumbled, and he snapped, demanding why I'd canceled the engagement. How can you be so petty? Jasmine and I are completely above board. Seeing me watch him with amusement, Daniel arrogantly added, as if doing me a favor, take it back. Isn't marriage what you wanted? Fine, I'll marry you. I shook my head in disbelief. I couldn't fathom where he got his ego from. Daniel, your arrogance is honestly revolting. Daniel's face grew even paler as I turned to leave, ignoring him completely. But then Jasmine grabbed my wrist tightly. She was beautiful, her face radiant and soft, though now twisted with fury and a hint of deep-seated fear. Sister Angelica, I respect you as Jacob's sister, so I'll call you sister. My relationship with Jacob is none of your business, so don't interfere. Yes, I am the housekeeper's daughter, and I know I'm beneath you, but you don't have to humiliate me like this. She raised her head, allowing tears to spill like shimmering pearls, looking heartbreakingly defiant. Pity, Miss Bai. What? Jasmine froze, momentarily baffled. I took her hand off my wrist calmly. Please address me as Miss Bai. There's no sisterly bond between us, nor will there ever be any other familial relation. I shot Jacob a pointed look, making my meaning clear. Jasmine stood there in shock. You can't treat me like this. If it weren't for that night she began to sob, clutching Jacob, crying with haughty pride. Jacob consoled her, his gaze dark and brooding as he looked at me. Angelica, don't overestimate yourself. The Ma family doesn't belong to you. Honestly, having a love-struck brother like him is embarrassing. He can't even be bothered to call me sister. How rude. Whether I control the Ma family or not, he'll find out soon enough. As for what Jasmine was trying to say just now, my gaze darkened slightly. She wanted to say that if it hadn't been for the night she'd pulled Jacob out of a burning building, he wouldn't be alive today. And we, the Ma family, should be grateful to her forever. I suppose she's right. I should be grateful to her forever. Chapter 4. Just before I returned home, the Ma family estate caught fire. Jasmine came to our home when she was 8. Along with her mother, Jacob had been kidnapped as a child, and after he miraculously escaped, he stumbled upon Jasmine and her mother, who took him in. Out of gratitude, my father gave them a sum of money. Jasmine's mother eventually asked my father for a job, explaining that her husband was a gambler and drunk who regularly abused them. She wanted to bring Jasmine away from that nightmare. Jasmine was the same age as Jacob, and my father, seeing her as well-behaved and sensible, felt pity and enrolled her in the prestigious school Jacob attended. They grew up together, practically as childhood sweethearts. At first, Jacob often bullied her, rarely even responding when she spoke to him. Yet they stumbled along this way until they turned 16. Then, one night, the family estate went up in flames. My father perished in that fire, while Jacob, whose room was furthest from Jasmine's, was saved by her. Since that night, Jasmine carved a permanent place in Jacob's heart. In the novel, the most heart-wrenching twist occurs when Jacob discovers that the fire was connected to Jasmine's mother. His soul is torn between love and hate, oscillating between keeping Jasmine close and pushing her away, even getting engaged to hide his feelings for her. On the day of Jacob's engagement, Jasmine staged her fake death, and Daniel hid her for 2 years, pushing the story to its peak. For those 2 years, Jacob acted out repeatedly. He broke off his engagement, drank himself into oblivion, and even attempted suicide. His regret over losing her led him to fall completely, irrevocably, in love with Jasmine. He forgot his father's death, remembering only that Jasmine had saved him, risking her own life. Such a grand, moving romance, isn't it? A love story that required the lives of his father and sister as the price. We merely lost our lives. They almost lost their love. Now my father is dead, and I'm ready to take a path that defies the very principles of this novel's world. Jasmine stood stubbornly, her tears falling one by one, her cheeks flushed. She clung to Jacob's shirt, her sobs turning into hiccups as she cried. Let's go. Let's never come back. They don't welcome us here. She shot a challenging look my way. Jacob gently wiped her tears, full of concern. All right. Let's go. We'll never come back. That's actually perfect. The further they stay from me, the better. I have no desire to be around their toxic drama. If they want to retreat to advance, I'll make sure they get what they're asking for. I took out my phone and called my assistant. Mr. Lin, freeze all of Jacob's accounts. Reclaim his car and property too. Yes. Everything. Jacob, Jasmine. I thoroughly enjoyed the colorful expressions on their faces. Hanging up, I walked over to Jacob and patted his shoulder. My dear brother, you'd better get home quickly. Yes. To the mansion where you keep your little treasure. If you're too slow, you may lose everything. Jacob gritted his teeth. Angelica, you're ruthless. I shrugged, completely unfazed. Since awakening in this world, I'd been grateful that Jacob remained a spoiled trust fund kid with no real skills, only capable of spending money on women. I wanted to see how he'd support his precious darling without money. As I turned to leave, Jasmine cried out behind me, insisting she loved Jacob, not his money. She claimed she would still love him even if he had nothing. So moving. I gave her a round of applause. Chapter 5. When I got home, my mother was waiting. She stood there, dressed elegantly in a jade green silk cheapao, her face tight with anger. She demanded to know why I'd cut off Jacob's access to his money. How was he supposed to survive without it? Looking at this mother of mine, pampered her whole life and never knowing a day of hardship, I felt a twinge of envy. Born with a silver spoon, spoiled through her youth, then married my father and settled into life as a privileged housewife. When everything went wrong, she was vacationing in the Maldives with her elite circle. After my father's death, the company was in chaos. All she did was cry to me about how Jacob was too young to be of any use. I ignored her pleas and went straight to work. Once the company stabilized, she dried her tears and returned to her shopping sprees, facials, and afternoon tea with her old friends. Once my father's darling canary, now she's mine. Even now, she hasn't realized who holds the power in this family. Fine, then I'll freeze your card and give him access, I said. She clutched her chest, tears streaming down her face instantly. I knew it. Now that your father's gone, you don't want me around anymore. I finally understood why she liked Jasmine so much. Beyond Jasmine saving Jacob's life, they shared a fundamental similarity. Both were delicate vines, happy to depend on men. They had endless things to talk about. In this novel world, men are always in power, especially men like Jacob and Daniel, heirs of powerful families with vast social influence. They are the magnets to which countless women are drawn. My mother, Jasmine, and even myself before awakening, are all reflections of this dependence. Sister, the most important thing for us women is to find a good husband. Being too ambitious or career-driven isn't attractive at all. Such an insidious mantra, yet so perfectly aligned with the rules of this game. Win a man's heart, and you're the ultimate victor. Just like now, I heard my mother say, Angelica, I know you've worked hard all these years, and you've done a great job with the company, but all this will be your brother's one day. You'll marry eventually, so don't treat him this way. I laughed, a genuine laugh. Whether I'd marry or not wasn't the point. I would not hand over my accomplishments to anyone else. Mother, is it that son of yours who can't seem to make a sensible decision that gives you such confidence? Do you think he's capable of supporting your shopping habit, clearing out half the stores, or that your friends only keep you around because you have a son? You're wrong. It's because of me. I'm the one who gives you the boldness to stand in front of me, making demands. And I'm a woman. She froze, her face a blank slate. I knew the shock my words had caused. In the original story, I'd listened to her guidance, becoming the dutiful sister who brewed soup in the kitchen when Jasmine got pregnant. But I should have done this long ago. I left her standing there, heading upstairs. She wouldn't give up. But that's fine. We have plenty of time to work through this. A few days later, Daniel stormed into my office and threw a stack of contracts on my desk. Angelica, what is this supposed to mean? I looked up lazily, remaining silent. Why are you canceling our partnership with the Daniel family? The question was laughable. The contract expired. I didn't feel like renewing it. Is that a problem? No problem at all. I wasn't about to lose money by breaking the contract just to spite him. Daniel was speechless. He paced the room, then glared at me furiously. I don't understand why you're acting this way. First, you cancel the engagement, and now, the collaboration. Or is this your way of getting my attention? Angelica, are you trying to play hard to get? Before I could respond, he nodded to himself, as if he just uncovered my grand scheme. Fine. You win. Let's get married. We'll go to the registry office now. Just stop this madness. I rolled my eyes and shot back. Daniel, tell me, exactly what qualities do you have that would make me cling to you? I snickered at his arrogance. Men like him, raised in gilded nests, are used to women flocking to them, but if you ask them to list their actual merits, they fall silent. Wealth? I have it too. Looks? Sorry. I have that as well. Intelligence? Skills? I lack none. Daniel certainly isn't shameless enough to brag about himself in front of me. I still remember the skepticism and scorn I faced from the men in the company when I took over. Each one eager to see me, a woman, fail. They wanted to see me fall, to watch me cry and admit I was weak and powerless. Daniel's face turned red. then pale, his lips quivering, but he had nothing left to say. Finally, he stormed out, hurling a bitter "You'll regret this" over his shoulder. I picked up the contracts, leafed through them, and made a call. Chapter 6. I have a very proud brother, determined to prove he could manage on his own. Jacob handed over the keys to all his properties and cars to Secretary Lynn. According to her, she'd never seen so many keychains in her life. Good, he's sticking to his principles. I heard Jacob used what little money he had left to rent a 3-bedroom apartment and move Jasmine and her mother in with him. Speaking of Jasmine's mother, Jacob, in his eagerness to protect Jasmine, destroyed all the evidence linking her to the fire that killed our father, leaving me with no leads. Encouraged by Jasmine, Jacob, with all his lofty ambitions, drafted a few business proposals and went out to seek venture capital. Unfortunately, he doesn't know himself as well as his drinking buddies do. Jacob returned empty-handed, only to try his luck with several other investment firms. But the result was the same. His proposals? They were nothing more than a stack of wasted paper. Secretary Lynn brought me a copy, and I laughed all afternoon. I know I shouldn't mock someone's dreams. It's a failing of mine. After laughing, I kindly told Secretary Lynn not to bother bringing any more of his plans to me. It was just a waste of paper. To cover basic living expenses, Jacob eventually had to find a job, but with no work experience, he struggled to find employment. The larger companies wouldn't hire him, and the smaller ones weren't up to his standards. He could only start as an intern, earning a meager salary. Despite this, he stubbornly refused to let Jasmine support him financially. After all, Jasmine still received luxury gifts and money while she was with him. I hadn't bothered to reclaim any of it. A man's pride is worth respecting, and I highly doubted she'd be using her funds to support Jacob, committed to providing for Jasmine and her mother. Jacob finally resorted to food delivery, a job where earnings come in the next day. In response, Jasmine opened a social media account and started sharing short videos, documenting how much Jacob earned each day and, more importantly, the gifts he bought her with that money. This became her source of pride, proof of Jacob's love. This is a gift from my darling husband. I love it so much. Poor hubby had an accident on his bike today. My heart hurts for him, but he still managed to get me the doll I wanted. Love you, hubby. Mwah. The comments section started buzzing, and soon, people were praising her for her husband-taming skills, even asking for advice. You and your husband are so in love. How do I find a husband like this? Please share. This is true love. Money doesn't matter, what counts is the sentiment. I'm crying. Straight men, take notes. Jasmine basked in the attention, crafting an image of the cherished wife persona. Occasionally, she'd post videos of herself doing household chores, waiting patiently for Jacob to come home. She even began live streaming, recounting the story of their romance. I love him deeply, but his sister doesn't approve of our relationship due to class differences. She even called me the daughter of a lowly servant, cursed to be poor forever, just because my mother was their housekeeper. But is a person's profession really so important? Why does discrimination exist? Shouldn't we be defined by our character and morals? I don't understand, but I just want to be with him forever. Clips from Jasmine's live streams went viral online, sparking outrage. Jacob's identity was exposed, and furious netizens were up in arms. And the culprit who caused them to suffer like this? Me. Of course, the internet mob turned its fury on me. Suddenly, I was branded with the label of classist. Chapter 7. My personal phone number, home address, and office location were leaked online, and the company's stock price took a massive hit. Seizing the opportunity, I bought back a substantial number of scattered shares, increasing my stake in the company. The media frenzy had spiraled into a discussion about social class. The reception desk at the office was inundated with wreaths every day, each with a banner reading, "Down with class discrimination." Dead rats showed up on my doorstep, alongside threatening letters scrawled in chicken blood. Thankfully, my residence was in a gated community with strong privacy protections. However, the cleaning expenses had skyrocketed, and other residents started complaining about the mess at the entrance. The property manager, worn down by daily complaints, reluctantly called me, MS. Bye. The online backlash against you has been relentless. While we're committed to protecting residents' privacy, there's only so much we can do. Can you address this? After hanging up, I received yet another call, followed by a barrage of hate-filled texts. Late at night, I sometimes scrolled through them, reading the endless death threats and curses. Old spinster, you think you're better than anyone? Go die. You're just jealous that someone else found a good man. You'd better watch out. Sis, you're disgusting. What makes you think you're so special? Even Jasmine joined in, messaging me. Sis, everyone's calling you out. Don't you think you might have made a mistake? Must be tough getting harassed at work every day. I really feel for you, working so hard to secure my and Jacob's future. Don't worry, when you're old, I'll find you a decent nursing home. After all, loneliness is hard. I chuckled, turned off my phone, and ignored her. With all the attention, Jasmine had started hawking products on live streams, using her earnings to splurge on endless purchases. It seemed the hard life had finally gotten to her. My mother, lounging nearby with a face mask on, muttered that it was all my fault. If I'd just let them be, things wouldn't have escalated to this point. Now, she couldn't even go out for tea with her friends. She kept saying that her SA had reserved several bags for her. Looking at me expectantly, those bags come with matching items. Ever since our conversation, my mother had been more cautious with her spending, fearful that I might cut off her cards again. Seeing me stare back in silence, she shrank back a little. Why are you looking at me like that? I set my phone down, waving my hand with a tempting offer. How about this? I'll set aside $5 million from the company's monthly charity fund just for you. Her eyes widened in shock, her words faltering. Are you serious? I nodded. She had no idea the charity fund was under constant oversight and couldn't be diverted for personal use. But it was enough to placate her. Yes. Just one condition. You'll need to spend it in places I specify each month. Deal? She nodded eagerly, like a chick pecking at grain. Good. Very obedient. I got up to change my clothes. I have a lunch meeting, so don't wait for me. At the cafe. As I waited, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, even with Daniel calling to mock me. Angelica, how does it feel to get what you deserve? You must be struggling at work now. If you beg, I might just consider renewing our partnership. Women can't survive without men. Admit it. You're not even a fraction as sweet as Jasmine. Ugh. This pathetic man with a love-struck ego. I immediately hung up and blocked him. I had arranged to meet Jacob's former fiancée, Selena, who arrived right on time. I appreciate punctual people, it makes collaboration smoother. Selena sat down in front of me with an air of haughty elegance. MS. Bye. You've got guts. With everyone calling you out online, you still dare show your face in public. Clearly, your company's PR could use some work. Her tone was full of sarcasm, relishing the thought of my misfortune. I took a leisurely sip of coffee and replied, better than being used as a bargaining chip for your family's business alliances, isn't it? Chapter 8. Selena's expression shifted instantly. Yes. After Jacob called off their engagement, her father, prioritizing family interests, arranged another marriage for her, with no regard for her wishes. Rumor had it her father's exact words were, I've raised you with the best of everything. Now it's time for you to repay me. Marriage alliances are the most reliable form of business exchange for families. As children of such families, we enjoy the benefits, but we're also expected to pay the price, especially as women, often excluded from succession. Instead, we're pawned off in strategic marriages, giving up our independence. I asked, are you willing to go along with this? Selena's expression hardened, a glint of sadness in her eyes as she replied with a self-mocking tone. What choice do I have? I'm not like you. Your family's tragedy handed you the chance to rise to power. You could call off your engagement just because you wanted to. Do you think I have that right? What if I gave you that chance? Selena hesitated, clearly taken aback. You're barely keeping afloat yourself. How can you make such an offer? And don't tell me you want me to seduce Jacob to ruin his precious relationship. I won't do it. I have standards. I smirked, sliding an agreement proposal across the table. Work with me, with By Industries. Prove your value to your father. and let by industries be your leverage to break off the engagement. I know. You're probably laughing at how absurd this sounds. But do you have the courage to take a gamble? A gamble on your own strength as a woman? Selena's gaze lingered on the contract. Clearly moved, I continued. Do you really think I haven't handled the backlash on social media? I glanced at my watch and told Selena to check the latest by industry's news. Videos began appearing online, all of them discussing me, but this time, they were testimonials from women in various fields. I first met Ms. Bai in a shopping center. My husband was beating me, and the story even made local news. If you don't believe me, you can look it up. Like many women, I once hoped for a marriage full of love, to be a devoted wife and mother, running a home and raising children. But all my sacrifices went unrecognized. Ms. Bai gave me a new beginning. She encouraged me to work, assuring me by industries would support me with daycare and accommodations for my child. Could a classist person, someone blind to life's hardships, have really helped me? There's nothing wrong with love, but we should never lose ourselves in it. My mother is currently the Ma family's housekeeper, and as you can see, I'm an amputee with one arm. Yet, with Ms. Bai's help, I became a teacher and found my place in the world. I'm Bai's assistant, Lynn. You see me now in business attire, living well. People assume my background is privileged, but I come from a remote mountain village, where girls often drop out at 16. Ms. Bai sponsored my education and gave me the courage to pursue my dreams. Selena watched the videos in silence, glancing up at me repeatedly as if seeing me for the first time. I hadn't fallen into Jasmine's trap of self-defense. None of the videos directly addressed Jasmine's accusations. Instead, they subtly dismantled her flimsy cherished wife narrative. Each of these women had found strength in themselves, striving to succeed in a world often dominated by men. As for the so-called classist bias, the careers and lives of these women spoke for themselves, every story verifiable, every life proof of its worth. I hadn't touched Jasmine's slanderous narrative because I wanted this storm to spread, to take root in every corner of society. I intended to ride this wave, using it to cement my own image as a force for empowering women, turning poison into honey. I nudged the agreement closer. You see? If their lives can be changed, why can't yours? Do you really want to be shackled to a man you don't love? With the current social sentiment, we're bound to achieve a win-win. Don't you agree? Chapter 9. Selena agreed to partner with me. Before she left, she asked why I'd chosen her as an ally. I smiled and said, "One is not born a woman but becomes one." It's from Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex. At the same time, I handed her a few photos of jewelry and asked her to track them down as a condition of our partnership. Knowing that her family's connections in the jewelry business would be useful, these pieces had been part of my collection. But after the fire that took my father, they disappeared. Meanwhile, public opinion had swung dramatically. Conversations on women's independence were trending, and Jasmine's previous statements had become the perfect cautionary example, with people roasting her ruthlessly. No wonder they looked down on you. You're just a lazy freeloader. Oh my God. She flaunts gifts bought with a man's hard-earned money. Trashy behavior. If you had even the slightest ambition to build a future with him, I'd respect that. But you're just rubbish. High-resolution photos of Jasmine in luxury brand outfits were circulating online, as were clips of Jacob delivering takeout in the heat, eating cheap noodles at street stalls. The online backlash intensified, turning the rage that had once been directed at me squarely onto Jasmine. Falling apart, Jasmine began calling me daily, begging for mercy. My only response was a quiet chuckle. I'm a woman, but I'm no saint. Some people even started apologizing to me publicly, admitting that their previous comments had been unfair and asking for forgiveness. I ignored them, too busy with Selena developing a new product line, leveraging the wave of support and female empowerment. With new product lines come job openings, and I wanted to encourage women to step out of their comfort zones, to break free from the lines society has drawn for them. I wanted them to know that winning a man's heart isn't the only goal in life. Of course, my actions drew some sneers. Critics labeled it a delusion of victimhood. These remarks, unsurprisingly, came from men, but I didn't care. In this story world, I was on an uncharted path. I had disrupted the plot, thrown the main characters off their course. Still, some things were inevitable. Jasmine was pregnant. I remembered my destiny in this novel. Someday, her 3-year-old prodigy would hack into my company's system, crashing the stock and leaving me bankrupt. Jasmine even texted me, taunting with a hint of madness lingering from her recent harassment. "Sis, I'm pregnant. With Jacob's baby, so now you'd better hand over Jacob's inheritance to us. Otherwise, I might just get upset. And who knows if this baby will make it to term." As Jacob brought Jasmine home, I was having tea with Selena. She seemed to be doing quite well lately. Her father had initially opposed our partnership, scoffing at the notion of 2 women running a business. Then Selena had thrown a promising financial report onto his desk. He shut up, and even the annulment of her engagement went smoothly. After all, a useful daughter is better than a son-in-law who may not be on your side. After ending the call with the housekeeper, I tossed my phone onto the table in frustration. "What's wrong? Who's riled you up?" Selena laughed, taking a sip of her tea. "Jasmine's pregnant." Pfft. Tea sprayed across my face, and Selena immediately dabbed at me with tissues, laughing apologetically. Sorry. I gave her a look before standing up to head home. Selena called after me. "Oh, by the way, I found some leads on that jewelry you wanted. I'll have them for you in a few days." I waved a hand over my shoulder, signaling I understood. As I approached the front door, I heard laughter from inside. Jasmine's sugary voice floated out. "This baby is really putting me through it. I keep feeling nauseous. All I want is some of Sister's Ange homemade soup." Chapter 10. I smirked as I pushed open the door. "If I make it, I dare you to drink it." The laughter inside stopped abruptly. My mother was the first to react. "Ange, you're back." I ignored her and strode over to Jasmine, staring pointedly at her belly. She shrank back against the sofa, hands instinctively protecting her stomach. "Sister, why are you looking at me like that? You're scaring me." I let out a cold chuckle. "Do you need me to massage your feet or hold your legs? Miss Pregnant? I thought I made it clear that you're not welcome in the Ma family home." I turned, directing my glare at Jasmine's mother. Well, if they wouldn't stay away, they'd just come to rub it in my face. I'm the one who brought them back. "If you have a problem, take it up with me," Jacob shouted furiously. In response, I slapped him hard. Then, for good measure, I slapped him again. Silence filled the room. Jasmine shrieked, "Sister, what are you doing? You can't just hit people." "Jacob, does it hurt? Get out. Don't think I'll go easy on you just because you're pregnant." Jasmine cowered, mumbling incoherently. For the first time, I looked at Jacob, my eyes misting with rage. "Do you really think I don't know how Dad died? How dare you bring them back here?" Jacob's face went pale, his lips trembling, speechless. "You are truly ungrateful." My mother, who had been standing by in confusion, finally reacted when she heard me mention my father. What are you talking about?" she murmured. Jasmine's mother sprang forward, panic flashing in her eyes. "Dear, don't listen to Angelica's nonsense. She was overseas at the time. She doesn't know a thing. She's just making things up. And remember, Jasmine saved Jacob's life." Then she turned to face me, her eyes cold and shameless. "Ma family girl, I may be old enough to be your senior, so even if you don't respect your elders, at least don't make false accusations. If you're claiming we had anything to do with your father's death, where's your proof?" Her audacious smugness made my blood boil. "Proof? My dear brother had destroyed that long ago." Jasmine's mother, seeing my silence, tugged Jasmine back to the sofa with a look of triumph. "Some people are just bitter spinsters who resent others for being young and beautiful. And she hoards her brother's inheritance. Where's the logic in that?" Jasmine, hand on her belly, nodded in agreement. Before I could respond, my mother exploded. With a shout, she lunged at Jasmine's mother, yanking her hair. "How dare you speak about my daughter? She's smart, beautiful, and self-sufficient. Who do you think you are? I'll scratch your eyes out. You won't leave here unscathed." I was genuinely shocked. It was as if I was meeting this version of my mother for the first time. The scene became chaotic, with everyone shouting and pulling, and Jacob's first instinct was to rush to Jasmine's side, shielding her from harm, still clinging to his cherished wife fantasy. My irritation grew as I opened my mouth to yell for everyone to stop. Stop this at once! I sighed. Why was everyone stealing my lines? Turning around, I saw Selena at the door, panting and clutching a file. I have proof. The evidence is right here. Chapter 11. I quickly took the file from her, clutching it tightly. Selena met my gaze and nodded with quiet resolve. Inside were the pawn shop records for my missing jewelry, pawned under Jasmine's mother's real ID. The proceeds had gone straight into her husband's account. Finally, I understood the purpose of the fire. You were the one cleaning my room back then. Since I was coming back home, you knew you couldn't hide what you'd stolen, so you used the fire to cover your tracks. The color drained from both Jasmine's and her mother's faces. Jacob had destroyed the evidence of the fire, leaving me unable to prove arson, but I'd found the tiny details. After examining every photograph of the aftermath for years, I called the police, reporting Jasmine's mother for theft. When they tracked down her husband, he'd just finished a bender. In the interrogation room, they turned on each other, blaming each other for every misdeed. It turned out Jacob's childhood kidnapping had been orchestrated by Jasmine's father. Desperate for money to cover his gambling debts, he'd targeted students from wealthy families, and Jacob was simply the unlucky one. But fate had intervened, and he'd escaped, falling straight into the clutches of Jasmine and her mother. Everything that followed, the love story with Jasmine, had played out just as the plot dictated. Neither of Jasmine's parents would be getting out of jail anytime soon, and so Jacob and Jasmine were cast out again, penniless. Jasmine clutched her stomach, screaming at me, "I'm pregnant, and this is a Ma family child. How dare you treat me like this?" I threw a set of photos at her face, pictures sent by nosy netizens showing her meeting Daniel, engaging in rather intimate, half-dressed embraces. Meanwhile, my hopeless romantic of a brother was out delivering takeout. "Are you even sure this child is Jacob's?" Ignoring her protests and Jacob's horrified expression, I walked back inside. I heard they returned home only to argue every day. Jasmine would call him a useless loser, berating him for not making enough money to support her. They continued this way for months, until Jasmine finally gave birth. Jacob had a DNA test done immediately, which revealed the child wasn't his. Daniel picked Jasmine up in a luxury car, and she climbed in without a second glance at Jacob. Love, isn't it? To my amusement, Daniel's family refused to let Jasmine in, stating they couldn't accept her past behavior. They told Daniel he'd have to sever ties with them if he insisted on marrying her. Daniel, ever the maverick, accepted a share of the family assets and cut all ties. Jasmine quickly took to flaunting her new gifts from him on social media, the posts frequent and extravagant. Selena and I joked about how quickly Daniel would likely burn through his funds. Apparently, not long, the day he sold his house, he showed up at my office. "Angelica, I was blind. I know now that you're the one I truly love. Let's get married." Ha! Get lost! According to Selena, I looked like I'd just swallowed a dead fly. In the meantime, Selena and I had ramped up our business partnership, with her father finally recognizing her abilities and giving her more control over the company, rather than pushing her into marriage. When Jasmine had sucked Daniel dry, she left him, abandoning their child in the process. I heard she flitted from one man to another, as long as they would spend money on her, be it a portly, balding tycoon or a married man. Her standards had lowered to match her dwindling prospects. Chapter 12. When I was awarded Young Entrepreneur of the Year, some industry leaders decided to host a celebratory dinner, gathering to discuss new ventures. To my surprise, the event turned out to be quite crowded, and Jasmine showed up as a date for a greasy, rotund boss. Upon seeing me, jealousy flared in her eyes, but before she could act on it, her companion gave her a sharp nudge. "That's a mess. Bye. Not everyone gets to meet her." Turning to me, he groveled. "A mess. Bye. Let me offer you a toast." I covered my glass, smiling with polite refusal. "Apologies, but I'm not drinking tonight." The man, deflated, left in a huff. muttering insults at Jasmine under his breath. When the night ended, I waited in the hotel lobby for my driver. Jasmine approached, venom in her voice. What's there to be smug about? Sitting there drinking with all those men, you're no better than any other. I didn't let her finish. I slapped her hard across the face. And with a smirk, I turned to her companion, who had just walked up. Mr. Wu, your date certainly has a colorful vocabulary. I got in the car, glancing back to see Jasmine being berated and slapped in return. As for her final fate, she bounced from man to man until her reputation and luck ran out. Eventually, she contracted a disease that left her shunned by everyone. Jacob, realizing he'd been played, spent his days kneeling outside my door, begging for forgiveness. At first, I ignored him. Eventually, I told him to go kneel at our father's grave instead. Out of my sight, when he'd finally humbled himself enough, I assigned him to a low-level position at one of our branch offices. I told him, stay there, and work your way up from the bottom. He accepted, asking only that I speak to him from time to time. My mother, still hoping for that $5 million allowance I'd promised, finally received it. But I sent her to a remote area as part of a charitable initiative. If you spend even a cent somewhere it doesn't belong, don't bother coming back. Her assistant called daily with updates. MS. Bye. Your mother cried all day, demanding to be brought home. Let her cry. She'll work when she's done. MS. Bye. She's on a hunger strike, insisting you come in person to fetch her. Tell her I'm busy. MS. Bye. Today she mentioned that the local children are quite sweet. I raised an eyebrow. Remind her to eat properly. Eventually, I began making angel investments under my own name, watching young women present their business plans, faces alight with passion. I realized just how far I'd come. I'd rewritten the story's trajectory, steering it to align with my own vision.